caused his death? That's Matthew Gallagher's brutality? It is not. Fourth, the prosecution told you in their opening that Matt was trained to intervene in these circumstances. Trained. During a 79-minute training video, 6 months before this incident, Matthew Gallagher, if he was even there, because they never proved he was even there for this training session, this particular one, had 43 seconds of training on a new DOCS policy about intervention. And what was the training? They read the policy. They picked up the policy and they read it. One sentence they read. That's the training you were told Matt Gallagher had that they claim was sufficient to prepare him for that moment in that room. No instruction was given by DOCS to Matt Gallagher or any DOCS employee on when to intervene, how to intervene, what to do when your supervisor, in this case 2 supervisors, are in the room when excessive force is being used. What to do when you're the last man to come onto a situation and don't know what happened before. No training in that. He wasn't told what tools to use, what words to yell, to tackle somebody, how to recognize if when force was used, was there a chance it was going to be repeated again minutes later. He wasn't taught that. He's not a psychologist. Training, there was no proof of training. Matthew Gallagher's work circumstance is something you may all have experienced. They hand you the handbook, you sign the handbook, and they say, you know the handbook now, right? You know it. That's the training. They sent him into hell. The New York State prison system is hell. And they didn't train him what to do. The prosecution did not put a single witness who testified that Matthew Gallagher was trained for what he was going to confront that evening. Investigator Marticello testified that he did not know whether Matthew Gallagher was trained on the duty to intervene. Marticello showed you a training document, a use of force, but there's no signature from the trainer confirming Matt's training. He could only tell you that Matthew Gallagher signed a document that says he attended a training session on use of force, but nothing on what was taught in that. This is the government's idea from its opening of training, a 43-second clip on a 79-minute long video. The 43 seconds is the reading of the definition of duty to intervene. DOCS policy, 1 sentence. It's on a flash drive in evidence if you want to see it. It does not tell the CO what to do. And the same document states this: a staff member who observes another staff member or another law enforcement member use force that exceeds the degree of force permitted by law and or policy shall promptly report these observations to an immediate supervisor within their chain of command. The supervisors are in the room. The supervisors are watching what's going on. How's Matthew Gallagher supposed to know what to do at that moment based upon that instruction to tell the supervisors? What if your boss, in fact, it's happening with his 2 bosses present, and his bosses, who you're looking at, Sergeant Mashaw on the left, Sergeant Trombley on the right. That's the leaders. That's who he's supposed to report the force. And they're smiling. They're both smiling. This is Mashaw. That's Mr. Trombley, who was so sorry about what he did. That's him. That's the men in charge of the room. There was no discussion in this so-called training video of any hypothetical intervention scenarios, any methods that the COs could use to intervene, what to do if the COs supervisors were there, and it's outrageous for the government to have told you in the opening that Matthew Gallagher was trained on how to intervene, how and when, and then presented nothing to you by way of that claim training other than 43-second reading of the policy. That's all the training they received. Fifth, perhaps the worst of what you were promised in the prosecution's opening to you was this, quote, Mr. Gallagher went so far as to cover his body camera up as he zipped his jacket up. What he was telling you was Matthew Gallagher's camera was on. He didn't want it to record others using force, so he zipped it up. That's not what the witnesses said. The witnesses told you nobody knew the cameras were recording. Matthew Gallagher's camera is on his body, but it's not recording. It's not activated. If he zips it up, it's like he zips up over nothing. He's not trying to cover anything up because he doesn't believe his camera's even operating at that time. Marticello testified that in all of his years in docks and experience, he didn't know the cameras were passively recording when they were turned off, that they were still recording. He didn't know that. No one knew that. Matthew Gallagher did not know that. So how could he intentionally try to conceal the actions of others by covering up his camera, by zipping up his jacket? You were promised that that was going to show that Matthew Gallagher was acting to cover up excessive force. 6, you would have expected from the opening that the people would show you that while Robert Brooks was being beaten, Matt Gallagher decided to cuff Robert Brooks' legs, intending to hurt Robert Brooks. But that's not what the video shows. I'm displaying on the room what Matthew Gallagher did at 9:26:41 with the shackles. He walks into the room, he puts the shackles on his right leg. That's what he does. That's what his job is. That's what Trombley told him to do. Trombley said to you, I told him to get the shackles, but I didn't tell him to put them on. What do you think is in Matt Gallagher's mind when Trombley says, go get the shackles and bring the shackles back? And when he walks in the room, you're going to put the shackles on. That's why you went to get them. You didn't get them for a hobby. You went to get them to put them on. And when Matthew Gallagher comes into the room, he goes, his head's down, because you can see his state of mind. I'm going right over and put the shackles on, because that's what my job is. That's what I'm supposed to do. Matthew Gallagher wasn't excessive or abusive, and he showed no intent to harm Robert Brooks when he applied the shackles. You can also see when Matthew Gallagher returned, Robert Brooks' legs were being held. So putting on the shackles also was a logical next step for him. Matthew Gallagher left to get the shackles because he was the only one who has them. It's in his van. When he returns with the shackles, no one is striking Robert Brooks. When he comes in right here, there's no one striking him. As you were promised you would be told. He sees 2 people holding Robert Brooks' legs. He attaches one to the left leg and then struggles with the right leg. Robert Brooks is not being beaten or struck while the shackles are being put on. Matthew Gallagher is charged with 3 counts in the indictment: second-degree murder, first-degree manslaughter, second-degree gang assault. With each count, he is also charged with being an accomplice, helping others while intending himself to see Robert Brooks murdered and assaulted. It is complicated, but Judge Bauer will explain it so we all understand at the end of the case. In essence, the government claims that by Matt's actions, pulling Robert Brooks onto the gurney and then placing shackles on his ankles, that Matthew Gallagher intended to injure Robert Brooks. He's also charged with second-degree murder. That under circumstances evincing a depraved indifference to human life, Matthew Gallagher recklessly engaged in conduct which created a grave risk of death to Robert Brooks and thereby caused Robert Brooks' death. By pulling him onto the gurney, by applying shackles, Matthew Gallagher, the government alleged, evinced a depraved indifference for human life and caused Robert Brooks' death. That's absurd. Depraved indifference, which you can see as part of having to prove depraved indifference murder, has a definition, which you're going to hear from the judge, but I'll show it to you. Depraved indifference to human life means utter disregard. Utter disregard, a wicked, evil, or inhuman state of mind. That's what's alleged, that they allege they've proven that with Matthew Gallagher's actions that I just told you. They also have to prove that he acted recklessly and created a grave risk of death. By pulling him up onto the gurney, he created a grave risk of death, according to the government. That he consciously disregarded a risk when he pulled him up onto the gurney and applied the shackles. And that those two actions constituted a gross deviation from the standard of conduct that a reasonable person would have done under the same circumstances. The government alleges that Matt's depravity, his depraved indifference to human life, his wicked, evil, or inhuman state of mind, they believe they've proven that to you. Because they have to prove that, or this charge has to be dismissed. Count 2 is first-degree manslaughter, second murder-related charge. They have to prove that Matthew Gallagher had intent to cause serious physical injury and cause the death of Robert Brooks. That he intended to cause physical injury to Robert Brooks, while pulling him up on the gurney and shackling him. That was his intent. Intent to cause physical injury and cause death. A conviction for this charge requires intent. This is different from a depraved indifference. Here the government must prove that Matthew Gallagher, by his actions, intended to cause serious physical injury. And that he did so by pulling Robert Brooks onto the medical gurney at 9:25:47 and putting him in shackles. And putting shackles on his ankles at 9:26:37. Once again, there is not proof beyond a reasonable doubt that Matthew Gallagher intended that it was his goal to seriously injure Robert Brooks by pulling him onto the gurney and later applying the shackles. The third count is gang assault. The government has to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that Matthew Gallagher intended to cause physical injury to Robert Brooks, was aided by two more persons actually present, and caused serious physical injury. The first one is the key. They have to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that Matthew had the intent to cause physical injury to Brooks by his actions. Again, repeatedly, the word intent. This crime, again, requires the government to prove that Matthew Gallagher intended to cause physical injury to Robert Brooks beyond a reasonable doubt. And as with other charges, the government, it alleges, it is proven that Matthew Gallagher intended to cause physical injury by his actions. All counts are charged under an accomplice theory of liability. This means that Matthew Gallagher acted with the mental culpability required for the charge, and he solicited, requested, commanded, importuned, or intentionally aided those others engaged in the criminal conduct. That's a mouthful. But what does it mean? It means that he helped people cause the death of Robert Brooks, serious injury or injury to Robert Brooks, and he intended by his actions that would happen. That was his, in his mind, his goal. That his goal in moving Mr. Brooks up onto the gurney, he wanted other officers to then assault him further and kill him. That's what he wanted. That he wanted them to injure him further. I know this part that I just ran through just now is a lot. It's new to you and it seems complicated, and it certainly is. This is the law. But Judge Bauer will explain it better than me before you begin to deliberate. The key, though, the absolute key, is what is Matthew Gallagher's state of mind. when you see him pull Robert Brooks up on the gurney and when he applies the shackles. Were Matthew's actions wicked, evil, inhumane? Did he create a grave risk of death to Robert Brooks? Was he intending to physically injure Robert Brooks? Did the government prove that his intent, his goal, was to injure Robert Brooks? Or what I think the proof shows is that he was trying to step forward when his bosses, his sergeants, Trombley and Mashaw in particular, stood mute, and to help get Robert Brooks onto the medical gurney after his co-workers were struggling to get Robert Brooks onto the gurney. I believe the evidence shows that Matthew Gallagher was trying to do his job. He had no intent to harm Robert Brooks. He was just trying to get Robert Brooks onto the gurney. And I believe the evidence shows that Matthew Gallagher's job was to respond to this reasonable order from Trombley to get shackles from his van, to get the shackles when his boss told him to get the shackles, to get them because his boss thought they were necessary, and then when he returned to apply the shackles, as he would any inmate who the boss wanted to be shackled. The government did not prove that Matthew Gallagher acted with depraved indifference. The bad actors present, Anzalone, Kessler, Farina, and Walrath, they knew some of what Robert Brooks had been put through before, but Matthew Gallagher did not. The prosecution presented to you a highlight reel called the compilation. It was shown to you yesterday, very technically done. With new movies, the marketing people offer a trailer, right? You see trailers on Netflix, at the movies. And more often than not, the trailer doesn't tell the whole story. Instead, it's a selective assembly of parts of the story that make the marketing people think will sell the movie. The government took carefully excerpted video, short, with dramatic effect. They highlight that which they claim shows people in their briefest and worst light. They exclude the context. They exclude anything that contradicts the message. In one of the images, the prosecutor showed a photo of Matthew Gallagher with a smile. I suspect he's going to show that that's evidencing guilt or indifference. So I think they suggest, for whatever reason, have you ever managed to smile in a setting that you shouldn't? In this trial, was there ever a moment when you smiled? What if that smile was photographed? And what if the photo was going to be used to define you, to define your character? What if the reporters wrote, "The jurors smiled at images of Robert Brooks," and then they matched up the timing of the smile with something very bad, made you look foolish, made you look indifferent? Is that fair, or is that a distortion? And is it intended to be a distortion? Why didn't the government in its compilation photos show the grim look of Matt Gallagher standing back at the doorway when he first arrives, and then moves forward when he sees Farina starting to use the cloth on Robert Brooks' face? Or his face after the 3 to 4 seconds striking by Farina and Anzalone when he steps forward? Or when Matt Gallagher looks at Sergeant Mashaw to do something? Or when his sergeant moves in front of Gallagher for 3 to 4 seconds after the assault, and you can see his concern? Does his face show that he's thinking what he's thinking? Or when his sergeant moves closer to the gurney and the COs try to pull Robert Brooks onto the gurney the one time, and then again, and then a third time? His face is serious. It's professionally serious. There's no smile on his face then, but the marketers in the trial trailer, in the compilation, want you to see Matt Gallagher smile and then use that to make you conclude he is bad character. The people have told you that Matt Gallagher had Depraved indifference because he knew he had a duty to intervene and did not act on it. Judge Bauer will instruct you that there is no duty to intervene in New York State law. It does not exist. It is not a law. And that you cannot find that Matthew Gallagher is guilty of the offenses solely by failing to intervene, because no such law exists. But the government will argue, and can argue, that you are to consider what you think that Matt Gallagher was taught, his training on intervention, or what he knew about intervention. And I'll speak to that further in a few minutes. You have to decide if the prosecution proved beyond a reasonable doubt that Matthew Gallagher's actions, moving Robert Brooks onto the gurney and putting on shackles, that those actions involve actions of a person with an evil or wicked mind. Matt Gallagher's state of mind is paramount. I'm being repetitious because I want that to sink in. His state of mind is what matters. What will help you to determine his state of mind? What he knew when he was acting, what he did, and what he didn't do. First, Matthew Gallagher was not present for what happened in the administration building when Kessler assaulted Robert Brooks. At 9:16 p.m., remember, Mr. Brooks arrived at 9:07. At 9:16 p.m., Matt Gallagher is in the infirmary lobby. This is his body cam vantage point you have right now. He and the other COs in the infirmary were watching a Tom Cruise movie. A call came in over the radio that there was an in-graft or a new inmate coming to Marcy. Matt Gallagher walked down the hall of the infirmary to talk to the nurses. Is that the mindset of a CO that wants to see someone harmed by going and talking and alerting the nurses? Or is he likely connecting with the nurses to be sure Robert Brooks receives medical care when he arrives to the infirmary for his intake medical exam? After almost a minute talking to the nurses in the nurses' room, he walks back down the lobby. Two other COs are standing just outside the infirmary front door. Then the red dot call comes in. The in-draft has changed. It's a call for an emergency backup. Now instead of a simple inmate transfer, it's an emergency. COs need help. So that's the message. This is Matt Gallagher's duty as a CO, to respond to calls for backup. Kessler told you that. Trombley told you that. It means a CO is in trouble. Matt Gallagher runs to his van. I told you that every second of Matt Gallagher is on film. Every second. And I'm painstakingly going to show it to you. As painful as that is, I'm going to show it to you right now. Because I want you to see what he did and didn't do and why he did it. Matt Gallagher, when he gets the red dot call, he runs to his van. He gets in the van and then he drives the van to where the red dot call indicated there was the problem, which is the walkway outside the administration building. It's dark. He can't see much, and there's another van in front as he pulls up the walkway. It's Farina's van. It's in front of him. That's Farina's van. That's the administration building. Right there on the right is Matthew Gallagher's van. He walks up to Farina's van and opens the side door, assuming that the COs are going to put the new inmate, who's Brooks, into it for transport when they arrive from the administration building. He's opening Farina's van. His camera shows that he can't see if any force was used on the walkway. He's too far away. He's not involved. He just stands next to the van. Instead, 6 COs and 2 sergeants walk towards and right by Matthew Gallagher with Brooks and do not put Robert Brooks into Farina's van. They walk right past him. They walk past the van, and now you're seeing their back end as they go by. The CO's escorting Brooks, who is handcuffed, are Anzalone with his backwards hat on, and Kessler, right there. Behind them are Farina and Kingsley. Farina, who's one of several people that act like an animal that night, is not a sergeant. But Tromley testified he's an experienced, specialized officer on the crisis intervention unit. He's more experienced than Matt Gallagher. And following them then is Sergeant Mashaw, Walrath, and Kiefer. Kiefer's holding the inmates' records, and Sergeant Trombley. Two supervisors, two sergeants, Trombley and Mashaw, and Farina, who is a member of a special unit. All seems good. Crisis over. Here's what Matthew Gallagher does not know. According to Kessler, Robert Brooks likely is already seriously injured. According to Kessler, Walrath had snapped in the administration building shortly after the 907 arrival. And Walrath, by all accounts, is also an animal. He had choked Robert Brooks, yanking him up by the neck, punched him, and Kessler had punched him, both repeatedly. Walrath had to be pulled off of Robert Brooks. This is after 9:07 p.m., the time period when the medical examiner, the doctor who testified on the autopsy, told you that Mr. Brooks suffered his deadly injuries. It was at that time. But Matthew Gallagher knows none of that. He is out in the parking lot driving over to Farina's van. As the two sergeants and 6 COs pass Matthew Gallagher, not a one even acknowledges Matthew Gallagher. He's invisible. It's the first of several times over the next 15 minutes. And mark this, by 15 minutes from now, Robert Brooks is almost dead. When the 6 COs pass Matthew Gallagher at Farina's van, they don't acknowledge him. It's the first of multiple times that Matthew Gallagher appears invisible. He's invisible the whole time to his colleagues. He's not one of the boys. No one pays attention to him. The COs escorting Brooks down the hallway, walk right past him. And none of the COs later, outside the exam room, talk to him as he walks up and stands out in the hallway. He appears as a loner. Kessler ignores him. Mashaw steps in front of him as if he's not there in the exam room. For Trombley, his only direction, his only acknowledgement of Matthew Gallagher is fetch. Fetch the shackles. The COs escorting Robert Brooks go from the walking Robert Brooks to dragging Robert Brooks to carrying Robert Brooks as they make their way towards the infirmary building. On the way to the infirmary, while Matt is not even there, Kessler punched Brooks again twice. That's what he said. Matt did not see this because he was driving his van back in the parking space. Robert Brooks is then being brought inside the infirmary building at 9:22 p.m. in 30 seconds. 9:22. There are now 4 officers with him as they go through the lobby. Still, Kessler and Anzalone carrying him on his shoulders. Kessler had punched him twice on the way to the infirmary. Kingsley is now holding his legs, and Walters is walking behind. This is coming into the lobby of the infirmary building. And that 4th person right there, that's not Matt Gallagher, that's Walters. Robert Brooks is injured, but Matthew Gallagher doesn't know this. He's still outside in the parking lot, and he's seen nothing so far that would cause him to believe there is any problem. He goes back to his van at the walkway, and then he drives and reparks it at 9:23 is when he parks it. By now, Robert Brooks and the officers are through the infirmary building lobby and down the hallway towards the medical room. If you look at this next side-by-side photographs, in the right-hand corner is 9:22 and 32. This is Mr. Brooks being carried to the lobby by the officers. At 9:22:32, this is Matthew Gallagher's body cam. He's in his van. He's nowhere near them. No one is in the lobby when Matt Gallagher comes in except Trombley, who's on the telephone. Robert Brooks has been brought by the officers down the hallway and into the medical unit at 9:22:43. This is a slide from Officer Abel. They've just gone in the room, and on the right-hand side is a nurse looking in the room. Once in the room, several officers, likely Kessler and Walrath, who beat Brooks in the administration building, and Anzalone, none of whom can be made out because their backs are to Alom's camera, that appear to be on top of Brooks in the medical room. The only image of that is from Officer Alom's body-worn camera, which I'm going to put up on the screen. At that moment, there's 3 to 4 officers on top of Robert Brooks in the medical unit. Matthew Gallagher, at that moment, is nowhere near the medical unit. He's coming in the door. This is him coming in the door as they're in the medical unit on top of Robert Brooks. This is the vantage point from Matthew Gallagher's camera. Multiple officers, actually I'm going to show the next slide, Ash. This is at 9:22:52. This is the medical unit. These are the officers in on top of Mr. Brooks. And this is the vantage point at that same moment of Matthew Gallagher. He's out in the parking lot. He knows none of what's going on. While Matthew Gallagher is down in the hallway, multiple officers come down to the area of the medical room. They go back and forth, they mill around, and they leave. Matt stands in the hallway and can see the nurses in the hallway. Slide 34, Ash. That's the nurses. This is Matt Gallagher's vantage point, and behind him is the nurse looking into the room. At 9:23:16, this is where Matt Gallagher stands in the hallway. Right there. That's Matt Gallagher on the left. He's had zero involvement with Robert Brooks. He knows nothing about Robert Brooks. They've had no interaction. To Matthew Gallagher, this is a typical in-draft, and he can and does stand in the hallway because the medical room has a sergeant who he can see and COs who he cannot see in the room. He's just not needed. For the next 119 seconds, Matthew stands in the hallway several feet from the entrance to the medical unit. He's casually talking to officers. He doesn't seem depraved. He doesn't seem to have an evil mind. He's literally hanging out. This is Matthew Gallagher's perspective. That's Officer Farina and Officer Walters. Matthew Gallagher sees nothing about what's going on in the room. At 9:23:26, whatever's going on, Walters finds it entertaining or something, and he goes like this with his hand. At 9:23, keep going. Sergeant Mashaw. Welcome, Sergeant Mashaw. At 9:23:35, Sergeant Mashaw, the man in charge of the room, according to Officer Trombley, stands at the door. That's Matthew Gallagher's boss. Officer Sergeant Mashaw is a profile of a disinterested clown the whole time. Under the circumstances as they unfold, his behavior is dangerous as a leader. This is the person to whom the COs take orders, are to follow, who is to guide them, who is to curb their behavior, who is to help them. and who himself is to make decisions. There are over 15 people in and out of that room, and Sergeant Mashaw never does or seems to say a thing. Is he afraid of Farina and Anzalone? Or of Kessler? Of Walrath? Is he incompetent? And how does Docs put him in charge of anything? Then Trombley comes in the room at 9:23:48. Right there is Sergeant Trombley. And right behind him is Walrath, the animal. Now there's a second supervisor in the medical room. Trombley's in charge, I think. He runs the shift, he runs the infirmary, but he told you, convoluted, that Mashaw runs the incident. I don't know if they know who's in charge, but somebody's in charge. Trombley told you he came down the hallway and he said he heard a scream. But watch the tape right here. He's got a smile on his face. No one in the hallway is moving or appears concerned. And the moment Trombley turns into the room, other than Mr. Brooks having blood on his nose and being on the end of the gurney, nobody appears to be doing anything. Kingsley's leaning on the counter. Anzalone has his hand on the back. And I believe it's Kessler has his hand on the back. Doesn't appear there was screaming coming down the hallway. It's Trombley's job now to meet with Brooks. To Matthew Gallagher standing out in the hallway after having been there 2 minutes, this is still a typical in-graft of which he has little interest. He gives a thumbs up to one of the officers who walks out. Probably trying to figure out, is everything okay? There's a thumbs up you'll see in a minute. I might have been earlier, but it's on there, and it's not important actually. It's now 9:25 and 12 p.m. 9:25:12. Robert Brooks has been on site since 9:07. That's 18 minutes. Matthew Gallagher has still not seen Robert Brooks, other than passing by his van in the dark at 9:21, 4 minutes before. Robert Brooks has been alone in that room with Anzalone, Kessler, and Walrath who were involved in 3 incidents. 2 of the 3 had struck him in the administration building and another in the walkway. And several others were also in the medical room, kneeling on top of Robert Brooks. Sergeant Mashaw is at the doorway, supposed to be monitoring what's going on. And Sergeant Trombley, who would be working with Robert Brooks to check him in, is supervising everyone in the room, if Mashaw wasn't there. Matthew Gallagher looks in the room the first time at 9:25:15. Slide 40. And this is what he sees. 9:25:15. It's the first moment he sees Robert Brooks in the light and who is in the medical room. There are 3 officers next to Brooks. And Trombley is next to them. At this moment, Officers Kingsley, Farina, and Anzalone. In that corner, behind them, is Trombley. And right here is Sergeant Mashaw. He's got the best look at what's going on. And it appears that they're wiping his nose off. It's got blood on it. It would make sense that he's wiping his nose off. He'd also been pepper sprayed. Maybe he's wiping the pepper spray off. But he's doing something. And it doesn't involve Matthew Gallagher. He's in the room watching and taking everything in for 5 seconds. From behind Sergeant Mashaw. 5 seconds. And it appears then that Robert Brooks bites Farina at the end of those 5 seconds. Farina is a long distance away, a good distance away, long is relative, from Matthew Gallagher, and in between Matthew Gallagher and Farina is Sergeant Mashaw. And Farina reacts to the bite by assaulting Robert Brooks several times in the head and maybe the neck as Anzalone hits his legs. You've seen that image a lot. It lasts 4 seconds, from 9:25:20 until 9:25:24. It's horrific. But it's 4 seconds. And it's over. You saw Mashaw take a half a step in and stop and settle back. He's not doing anything. There's not a thing Matthew Gallagher from his location in the doorway could do to have stopped Farina. He wasn't in the room 5 seconds before it happened. And then it took only 4 seconds for it to start and be done. As importantly, his 2 sergeants, the bosses in the room, they don't move. Both are closer to the gurney than Matthew. Sergeant Trombley can touch them. He's that close. And Mashaw is in front of Matthew. Both Kessler and Trombley testified that there was no notice before Farina snapped. Kessler testified he was shocked and didn't know what was going to happen. Trombley testified that he didn't expect that it happened. But then it stops. As quickly as the assault happens, it ends. Trombley told you it was over. He thought the use of force was over. And Matthew Gallagher would also believe it's over. He's been in the room 5 seconds when Farina and Anzalone lose it, and once it's over, there's nothing for him to do. There's nothing more to stop. But there are steps Sergeant Trombley and Sergeant Mashaw are required to do at that moment. It's now disciplinary. It's supposed to be disciplinary at that moment. And Sergeant Trombley is supposed to tell those officers right then, Farina and Anzalone, to leave the room. It's policy. Trombley testified. DOCS has a policy that if an officer is involved in a use of force, he has to be removed from the vicinity of the inmate. Matthew Gallagher is expecting that Anzalone and Farina are going to be removed from that room. Why? Because it's DOCS policy. It's standard. And Trombley explained why that policy exists. If an officer uses force on an inmate, he shouldn't be with the inmate further because he could be hyped up. He could be excited. He could be agitated. And there's an opportunity or possibility that it will happen again. So if Anzalone and Farina are removed from the room as they're supposed to be, who would take over with Robert Brooks? The 2 sergeants are there, but there are also other COs nearby. There are 3 to 4 in the hallway, and Matthew Gallagher is just inside the room because none of them had been involved in the use of force. Matthew Gallagher would be suitable to step in place of Anzalone and Farina when Trombley or Mashaw sent them out of the room. But Trombley testified, I didn't send him out of the room. He didn't do anything. Instead, Trombley and Mashaw leave them both in the room. And then with Robert Brooks on the edge of the gurney, the officers who should have been told to leave the room by policy, and Officer Kingsley try to move Robert Brooks from his leaning position at the end of the gurney up onto the gurney. He's leaning at the end of the gurney. He has to be placed on the gurney. He's not able to get on the gurney on his own power. He's going to be placed on the gurney for a medical examination and to be searched. And the officers start trying to move Robert Brooks onto the gurney. Once, twice, 3 times. They try to pull him up onto the gurney. And they don't get him up. Is he passively resisting? Is he knocked out? Do they have the wrong angles or leverage? But Matthew Gallagher, he wouldn't know the answer to any of those questions. All he can see is they are not getting Robert Brooks onto the gurney. And now Matthew Gallagher faces a decision. What is he to do? The government argues that Matt's decision in the next several seconds proves beyond a reasonable doubt some combination or all of these. That he's depraved, that he's indifferent to human life, that he created a grave risk of death to Robert Brooks, that he intended to injure Robert Brooks, that he intended to help others injure Robert Brooks. Simply that over these next 16 seconds of Matthew Gallagher's life, the government's alleging that he's deciding to injure, he's intending to injure and cause the death of Robert Brooks. That's what they have to prove beyond a reasonable doubt. The next 16 seconds of Matthew Gallagher's life, over the next 16 seconds, they state that he intended to injure Robert Brooks. "16 seconds. 1, stop it, Ash. They tried to pull him up once. They didn't get him on the gurney. Ash. Twice, they can't get him on the gurney. Mashaw moves in front of Brooks, but he doesn't move in front of Farina, excuse me. Sergeant Mashaw moves in front of Matthew Gallagher, but he doesn't approach to help. He doesn't help. Go ahead, Ash. Third time, they don't get him on the gurney, and they're getting rougher. I don't know, they're frustrated. Oh, they're incompetent. They can't get him on the gurney. So who's supposed to act? He's supposed to act. Mashaw. He's supposed to take charge. And he doesn't. What is Matthew Gallagher's state of mind? Because it's going to be judged by you for these 16 seconds. What does he know before he makes his next decision? When they try to pull him up 3 times and fail, when he knows that he's been struck by Farina less than 30 seconds before, Farina and Anzalone, what's he supposed to do? What's his decision process? What does he know? This is what he knows. Number 1, he knows he's not angry at Brooks because it's not Brooks' fault that Brooks can't get up on the gurney. He knows who's in the room and in charge. His boss is to his right and in front of him. His other boss is in the corner of the room and can reach to the gurney. He can touch it. And they're all watching. Trombley, Mashaw. And they're doing nothing. What else does he know? He knows that Farina and Anzalone 30 seconds before had used excessive force and they weren't sent out of the room. So they're going to be agitated. He knows what the employee requirements are. If an employee observes another employee in an altercation with an incarcerated individual, all available employees must immediately go to the aid of the involved employee. Matthew Gallagher, by rule, by policy, has to now step up. He's got to do something. He has to do something. Directive 4944, the duty to intervene I spoke about earlier. What's he supposed to do? Who's he to tell at this moment when his supervisors are watching and are closer to Brooks than he, who have been in the room longer, who have more experience than he does? What's he supposed to do in terms of intervention when he knows that they're there? The government says he has a duty to intervene because there's a doc's written policy and he was trained on it. I went through that training, but I didn't go through 4944, the actual policy. It's the entire document's 16 pages long. This is the priority of Doc's training of Matthew Gallagher and COs. 16 pages on force. 12 of the pages are how to write a report. 12 pages are how to fill in the blanks on reports. One sentence in this policy is on duty to intervene. It provides no details on what Matthew Gallagher is to do. Does he yell? Does he ask Marshall or Trombley to do something? They're the bosses. They should be telling him. Does he run from the room? Does he just leave the room? What was he taught to do? He wasn't taught anything. And they never showed you he was taught anything. You didn't hear from the instructor who taught these guys what to do. They claim he took a course on force that included duty to intervene. That's crap. He was read one sentence of a policy manual. That's his training. 79-minute video he was shown. In 43 seconds, they read the policy. And that is supposed to prepare Matt Gallagher for his next decision. That's supposed to prepare him. And for his failure to act like they think he should act, he's a murderer, manslaughter, and gang assault. They gave him nothing of what he needed to make a decision. They sent him to hell and didn't tell him how to act. That's the extent of his preparation. No guidance from Trombley, no guidance from Mashaw. Nobody's taken out the wrongdoers from the room. But regardless of what training he had, is there something he can do? He's supposed to do something. He's supposed to step forward and help. They failed 3 times to get Robert Brooks on the gurney. And what could he do? He could go out in the hallway like the other cowards and just stand there and watch. He could act like Mashaw. Why couldn't Matthew Gallagher put his hands in his pocket and do nothing? That's what Sergeant Mashaw was doing. Why couldn't he do what Sergeant Trombley's doing? Stand in the other corner with his hand on a pen 2 feet away from what's happening and not doing anything. He could wait longer for an order. But then look at the pathetic look of Sergeant Mashaw. He has no idea what he's going to do. Matthew Gallagher is left standing at this moment having no idea what to do. He has seconds to decide. There's no order coming. His supervisors are mute. One is doing nothing. The other is not paying attention. And the officers are having trouble getting Robert Brooks onto the gurney. They try 3 times and they can't get him up. I've talked for 20 minutes on this. 28 seconds have passed since Matthew Gallagher was in the room. 28 seconds. And he's got to process all this and make a decision. What can he do? He could step forward. He could do something to help get Brooks on the gurney. Is that intervention? Maybe. Is it going to the aid of an officer? Maybe. Is it diffusing what appears to be getting more and more heavy-handed as they try to pull him up on the gurney? He could diffuse that. He could help Brooks get on the gurney to alleviate the struggle the other officers are having or to help. But as he stands here, his mindset is, somebody help me know the right thing to do.
Judge, I object to that. He's speaking for the defendant, and that's not proper. He's going in. There's no evidence of that in this record.
No. His decision has to come in an instant. Not 20/20 hindsight, not through analysis, in an instant. How would he ever anticipate that this instant decision that he would have to make would be judged in the horror of this courtroom a year later? Almost. So he steps past his leaderless sergeant and takes one hand, his left hand, and only his left hand. He does not touch Robert Brooks' body. He does not hit Robert Brooks. He doesn't touch his skin. He grabs his shirt and he pushes him up onto the gurney. He takes the shirt with his left hand, and if he succeeds in getting him onto the gurney, everything should stop at that moment. Brooks would be on the gurney. And as he does it, Without notice, Farina, who is behind him at that point as he's pushing, Farina's over in the corner with Trombley. Farina comes around. According to Trombley, without notice, and as Matthew Gallagher is pushing him up on the gurney, Farina comes behind and begins kicking Robert Brooks in the groin area. Horrific. Matthew Gallagher at that moment has his back to Farina, and he's looking in Mr. Brooks' face. He's trying to evaluate what's going on. He is not moving Robert Brooks so Farina can assault him. He is trying to move Brooks, Mr. Brooks, so as to end the struggle and the frustration he sees on the officers trying to get Brooks on the gurney. And notably, Farina's not trying to get him on the gurney. He's to the side. The other officers are trying to get him on the gurney. Matthew Gallagher cannot see what Farina is doing because Farina's behind him. This is Farina kicking. This is Matthew Gallagher looking down at Robert Brooks' face. Officer Kingsley then turns his back into Matthew Gallagher, pushing into Matthew Gallagher and moving him out of the way. Here's the entire clip. This is 47 action. Okay, go back. Right, stop. As he does that, Officer Trombley, who's right here, testified, I told Matthew Gallagher to go get the shackles. So Matthew Gallagher's leaving the room because he was told to get the shackles. Now this is the first order anyone's issued, and it's by Trombley. And he leaves to get the shackles. Matthew Gallagher is gone to get the shackles for 37 seconds. From 9:25:57 to 9:26:32. Play 49, Ash. You can see him leave the room. It was 9:25:57. That says 9:26. But he's already out of the room at this point in time. Matthew Gallagher has no problem in his mind, has no problem to leave because he's leaving behind his bosses. They will handle the situation. Trombley has given an order, albeit weak and late, but Mr. Brooks is on the gurney. Trombley or Mashaw are in charge, and Matt Gallagher is heading up the hallway to do what he was told to do. Keep playing up 49. Well, Matthew Gallagher is going out of the room. Farina starts up again. Trombley and Mashaw do nothing again. At 9:26:03 to 30, you will see Farina and Walrath again assaulting Brooks. Stop there. It's horrible, right? Matthew Gallagher's not in the room. He doesn't know that. He doesn't know that just happened. He's walking down the hallway to get the shackles. Slide 51. At the moment that they strike him again at 9:26:20, this is Matthew Gallagher's body cam. He's out of his van. He doesn't know this is going on. He doesn't know that there's another strike going on. When he returns, the assault, the next assault, that assault, is over, and he didn't know that Farina had again assaulted Brooks while he was gone with Walrath, neither of which is supposed to be in the room because of the earlier use of force. And what does he see when he returns? He sees Farina and Walrath struggling with Brooks' legs. He went out to get the shackles because the boss said to him, he comes back and they're struggling with his legs. Slide 52. Matthew Gallagher walks in.